Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Mid-City Sermon Cast. So, do you ever wonder why we do what we do as Christians? So, like why do we worship? Why do we give? Why do we serve? Why do we do all that stuff? Is it because we're trying to earn points with God? Is it because we're trying to be good people? So in John 12, we read a story about something that happened with Jesus that I think kind of helps us get to the bottom of some of those questions. So let's dive in. So throughout the season of Lent, we've been journeying with Jesus as he makes his way to Jerusalem. And in the story we're going to look at today from the Gospel of John, Jesus stops in a town called Bethany, which is just about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. And something happens that, to me, teaches a really vital lesson. I mean, this is really important stuff about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to read the story. Again, this is from John 12, and this is verse 1 through 8. So 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served. Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard and anointed Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." So again, we hear the story about Jesus stopping in Bethany, and we kind of to get the context to understand he's on his way to Jerusalem, where he's going to be turned over to the authorities, and that will end eventually in his crucifixion. But he stops in Bethany, which is the home of Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha. And John tells us that they gave a dinner for Jesus. During the dinner, Mary took a pound of costly perfume. She anoints Jesus' feet and wipes his feet with her hair. So Judas suggests that the perfume could have been sold for 300 denarii. Now, a denarius was an amount of money that equaled a day's wage. So if there were 300 of them, that's almost a year's wage, right? So this perfume was worth a whole lot of money. And Judas basically asks, why didn't we sell this and give it to the poor? So one question that I have in this story is, why did Mary do this? What caused her to perform such an extravagant act, to give, basically a year's salary value of perfume to Jesus? And what does it teach us about being disciples? So many people see this act of Mary's as foreshadowing Jesus' coming death, that she was anointing him in preparation for his burial. And that's certainly a possibility. But what Jesus says in verse 7 makes me think there's something else going on here. So this is what he says. He says, "She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial." And what I read is Mary bought the perfume intending to use it at the time of Jesus' death. So Jesus has been talking about his death. So she bought the perfume thinking, when he dies, I'll anoint his body with it. But Jesus isn't dead yet. Like he's there in her home, and yet here she is using the perfume. And the question I ask is, what happened that made her change her plans, right? So she bought it for the day of his death, but now she's using it while he's still alive. What happened? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. If we go back just a chapter before this, we encounter really what some would say is, one of Jesus' most incredible miracles. He raises Lazarus from the dead. Now remember, Lazarus is sitting at this table, right? They're having this dinner at his house. Mary and Martha are his sisters. And I was trying to think this dinner takes place like right after he's raised from the dead. And part of me kind of wants to think maybe they were throwing the dinner to thank Jesus, right? Hey, I mean, you did this kind of like great thing for our brother. Least we can do is like feed you something, right? Has anybody ever done something for you that caused you to just overflow with gratitude? Like it just naturally kind of came out of you? I was thinking about this, and the clearest thing for me came right after I had my open heart surgery. I had this incredible sense of gratitude towards my doctors. Like they had literally saved my life. And it's been 8 years since then, but whenever I see my doctors, I still get this kind of sense like, oh my gosh, these guys, you saved my life, right? And my heart still sort of overflows with thanksgiving. How would you feel if someone brought your loved one back from the dead? How would you express your gratitude for that person? How would you say thank you for that person? So I think that Lazarus and Martha and Mary's hearts were overflowing towards Jesus because he had brought their brother back to the dead. Lazarus probably was the most grateful of all, right? So they invite him over to their house for dinner. Martha does what she always does. She whips up a wonderful meal. But when Jesus walks through the door, Mary wonders, what can I do? How can I thank him? And I think she thought, oh, wait a minute, I know. I've got that perfume. And so in that moment, she changes her plans. She gets out that perfume, and in an act of extravagant gratitude, she anoints Jesus' feet with this perfume. So do you see, Mary's act is a response to the gift of life that Jesus has given. And this is the key thing I want you to kind of catch on to. Mary's act was a response to the gift of life that Jesus had given. And to me, this is a perfect picture of the Christian life. Why do we do what we do? Why do we worship God? In particular, why do we worship Jesus? Why do we pray? Why do we give? Why do we serve? Why do Christians do the things that they do in the world? Listen to me. It is not because we are trying to earn points with God. And I actually think if that's the way we approach these things, that it actually kind of hurts us. It can hurt our walk with God. It's not because we're trying to be good people. I always try to think about when I'm trying to be a good person, like who am I trying to prove it to? Like I think some people do go, well, I need to prove it to God. Maybe sometimes we think I try to prove it to other people. And there are probably some times where I'm trying to prove it to myself. Look, I really am good, right? So I'm going to do all these things. And again, what I would suggest to you is this is not the reason to do the things that we do. The reason that we do the things that we do is we are doing them in response to what God has already done for us in the person of Jesus. So as Christians, you and I have been given the gift of new life. We have been. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, if anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new. And this new life comes when we accept the gifts that God gives us in Jesus Christ. And there's all kinds of ways of talking about what gifts, Brady? What are you talking about? There's all kinds of ways of talking about these things. I find it helpful. I usually think about it kind of in three different ways. The first gift that I've received from Jesus is I have received the gift of a restored identity. So I really think one of the things that Jesus came to do is to remind us of who we are, right? That we've sort of forgotten and we've strayed from who we are. John 1:12-13 says this, to all who receive him, who believe in his name, he gave the power to become children of God, who were born not of the blood or the will of the flesh or the will of man, but of God. So it's this, the idea that we are reborn as children of God. And so sometimes when I kind of question myself or question who I am or question my identity, I have this reminder and this restoration from Jesus that I am a child of God. Right? And that's a huge thing to know. I think the second thing that Jesus gives me, that gives me life, is he gives me a life of purpose. You ever wonder what the purpose of all this is? Boy, I do. Sometimes I go, what is this all about? What are we doing, right? And to me, Jesus makes it abundantly clear when he tells us that we are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Like, that gives me my purpose in the world. On my best days, when I get up in the morning, I say, all right, how am I going to love God today? How am I going to love my neighbor as myself? And the third thing I think that Jesus gives us is he gives us the gift of hope for the future. Because of Jesus, because of the resurrection, which we're going to look at in a few weeks, I know what the future holds. One of my favorite quotes about the resurrection is that, what the resurrection tells us, what Easter tells us is the worst thing is never the last thing, right? So whatever bad thing we're going through, that bad thing does not get the last word. So I have this great hope for the future. And I always try to think about this. So this is this question of identity. Who am I? I'm a child of God. What's my purpose? Why am I here? I'm here to love God, and I'm here to love people and as myself. And then, and where am I going? I'm going towards a beautiful future where love and life win, right? So when I think about those three things, I think, so imagine if you don't know the answer to those three things. And the way I think about it is, imagine if you ran into somebody in the woods, like you're walking through the woods and you come upon a path and you went up to him and you said, hey, who are you? What are you doing here and where are you going? And the person said, I don't know. And they didn't know the answer to any of those questions. What would you call that person? I'd call them pretty lost, right? So again, because of Jesus, we are not lost anymore. We're given this gift of identity, we're given this gift of purpose, and we're given this gift of hope. The hymn writer John Newton actually wrote this about his transformation that he experienced with Jesus. This is from Amazing Grace. Everybody knows Amazing Grace, right? I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. So this is one way I think about the gift that we're given in Jesus. So what is the response to this gift? Mary poured out her life in extravagant love for Jesus. And that's what we're called to do as Christian people too. So I read this amazing story this week about a woman named Turia Pitt. She was an Australian woman who barely survived a horrific grass fire during an ultra marathon in 2011. You know those like fires that sweep across prairies? We see them in the U.S. sometimes. These like wildfires, and man, they come in fast and furious. Well, she was apparently running in an ultra marathon. That's one of those really, really, really long runs that people go on. And she was out in this prairie area, and this fire kind of caught her and burned 65% of her body. She was helicoptered out of there and went to the hospital, and she was told that she might not ever walk again. But her recovery through years of surgeries, years of therapy, and if you can imagine the pain, right, because burns are very painful, her recovery was really miraculous in a lot of ways. So what do you do when something like that happens to you and you survive and you end up living your life again? She did not retreat into bitterness or self-pity. Instead, what she did was she poured herself into helping others. So she became a motivational speaker. She's kind of become a coach. But I thought one of the coolest things she did was she raised over $1 million for an organization called Interplast. And it's an organization that provides free surgical care for people in developing countries who have life-altering injuries. So they do like the cleft palate surgeries, and they do surgeries for people that just, they're in poor countries, they can't afford these things. And anyway, that's what this organization does. But she went out and again, having experienced her own pain, her own agony, and her own recovery, she's now gone out and kind of passed that gift on to other people. She is grateful to be alive, and she lives out of that gratitude. That's her kind of response. So one question I wanted to ask you is, first of all, have you accepted the new life that Jesus offers you? Have you accepted the identity that Jesus gives as a child of God? Have you kind of settled into the fact that your purpose in life is to love God and to love others as you love yourself? Do you live with hope for the future? Not a hope that denies the difficult things about this world and about life, but a hope that looks past those difficult things. I think in a lot of ways, like Jesus did, right? Have you accepted that new life? And if not, I would really encourage you to. I'd encourage you, dig into the Jesus story, learn about who Jesus is, and let his story begin to shape your story. If you have accepted that new life, how are you living in response to it? How are you loving God? Are you a person who gives yourself to worship and to prayer and to kind of creating that intimacy with God? How are you loving others as yourself? How are you going out and caring for others and giving back to others? So Mary's extravagant act, I think, was a response to the gift of life that Jesus has given. I think Mary's response is a perfect example of how you and I are called to live as Christians. So let's get out there and do likewise. Catch you next time, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Mid-City Church Sermoncast. If you'd like to find a home sheet, a resource that accompanies the sermoncast that has more questions to explore, the scriptures we use today, and more information, you can visit our website, midcity.church/sermoncast. If you'd like to support Mid-City Church by giving, please text the word GIVE to 225-307-0662. Thank you for your generosity, and we look forward to seeing you next week.